have a homes burning down issue. And that's how we think about it. We can't price or underwrite our way out of this issue. We need to think about how do we go to the root of the problem? How do we think about it in the context of climate change and urban configuration and all of the, we have a bit of a housing crisis in California. So all of that contributes to it. And it's not going to be I'm going to do X and see returns next year. Hi, I'm Laurna Castillo. I lead state product management at CSAA Insurance Group. We're a AAA branded insurer. And this is the future of insurance.
Live from the floor of ITC Vegas 2025.
Laurna, thank you for taking some time out of ITC. It's really loud, it's really busy. It's a big commitment because I know you've got lots of meetings to make. But there's a lot to talk about. Since a year ago, I stepped down with Brian Vegas.
Yep.
Little did we know, we recorded, I think, a week before the Palisades fire kicked off.
Oh, wow.
And released in the midst of that. And we were talking about wildfire so much.
Yeah.
Fast forward a year, just about a year, not quite. Where are things at? And for context, everyone should listen to the episode. It's really valuable. But CSAA was this, I think, in a very unique position as a major homeowners insurer in the state of California, who was staying openly committed to the state, who had been for years.
Right.
And so we were talking about, how is that? How do you do that when that's not the general tone from many carriers facing a very tough time in California?
That's right.
I'd love to hear kind of where has that gone since?
Yeah, it's been a crazy year being a California property writer. The Palisades fire, as you mentioned, was just a huge industry event. And there's a lot of firsts that have happened this year, including things like the FAIR Plan having their assessment and figuring out how do we do that and the recruitment. So a lot of new things challenging insurers this year. But I think the tone has somewhat changed, especially if you think back, 5-10 years ago when we were had the North Bay and the Paradise fires.
Yes.
Many insurance companies now are starting to think about, okay, running away is not necessarily the right thing in the long term. How do we lean in and help change the landscape of insurance in California?
Yeah.
And that's something that we CSAA have been doing for a long time, right? There's many reasons why we're in a good position to do that. We're AAA. It's in our blood. You think about way back into the 70s when we had seatbelt laws coming out, right? Yeah. We really leaned in on that side. So it's just kind of part of who we are. And now I think other insurance companies are starting to think the same thing. Yeah. Yeah.
But it's hard to be, you're very committed to the market. And as you say, be AAA, one of the major AAA clubs in the country, but certainly in California.
Yeah.
And I know you write in other states as well, but California is
it's most of our premiums. Yeah.
To be committed is amazing. And then there's also the financial reality about the viability. Right. And I felt like where most carriers had been sort of stuck on rate for many years, chasing business, CSAA was doing very careful, it seemed like thoughtful moves on rate on a regular basis. So it was never this shock pullback or shock rate action. Not to say you didn't take rate, but it wasn't, 40%, 50% that we're seeing and, kind of front page of the newspapers.
Headliners.
Yeah. That was so interesting to me. And that's what Ryan and I really focus on is how do you balance that? Because it is an industry of commitment.
Right. Yeah.
And I should have asked for your background, why are we still talking about it? Why am I talking about this with you in particular?
Yeah. Yeah. So, state product management, we're responsible for the P&L for our company. So I mentioned, the West and then California, 67% of our premiums. Yeah. So it's a huge state and, thinking about the viability of being able to continue to write auto and property in there is somewhat of an existential question for us.
Yeah, it is.
It is. So that's my team. So we're responsible for all of the, acquisition, profit, P&L, everything. Yeah. Cap management, reinsurance, capital management for California. And so for my team, I have a California property director, and she does the day-to-day. She's actually here today.
Okay.
She does the day-to-day management of California property, but the CEO cares about it. All of the board cares about it. Everybody cares about it. Yeah. So we're all involved in some way. And it's an area where, back when I started managing California property in 2018, there was nobody leaning into the space. It was just a lot of this is why we can't X. This is why we can't sell property insurance, right? And
that's the tone in insurance, though. We can't do this because take your pick.
Right. Yeah. So for me, it was an opportunity to flip that on its head and say, okay, yes, we can't, but what will it take to be able to get back into the market, or for this to be a viable market again? And so we started leaning into mitigation, right? So Ryan, he's on the chair of the board for IBHS. So he's very attuned to the details of wildfire mitigation for individual property. We also started leaning in on a societal basis. So it's not just a education issue. It's not just a financial issue. There's also a lot of like social science, like societal issues that you have to get past as well. If you think about like neighborhood sentiments, or like a property owner who has grandma's rose bushes in front of their window, like how do you get them to take action? So to me, that was really, really interesting. I have an actuarial background, but I came into product management about 10 years ago, and this was something new and challenging, and nobody was really leaning in. So that was kind of what motivated me.
It is predict and prevent, like it's been this, other than AI and maybe embedded insurance, like it's one of the 3 big kind of hashtags of the past few years. And I feel like we haven't done much. And then I look at some of the things that CSAA has done. You mentioned the work with IBHS, like that's sort of like putting it into action more tangibly. But what you're describing is, it's not just like, oh, we gave this discount as one thing. Like you're talking about like your interaction with society and the community. Like it is a much bigger effort to actually change behaviors is what we're talking about.
That's right. It's there's a saying, and I think Ryan did it on the podcast last year. We don't have an insurance issue. We have a homes burning down issue. So it's a great saying. So and that's how we think about it, right? We can't price or underwrite our way out of this issue. We need to think about how do we go to the root of the problem, right? And it's hard, right? How do we think about it in the context of climate change and urban configuration and all of the, we also have a bit of a housing crisis in California. So, all of that contributes to it. And it's not going to be I'm going to do X and see returns next year, right? It's really a long-term play, which I mentioned earlier with seatbelts. It took actually 30 years for seatbelts to be adopted by car manufacturers, and then actually go into law and then be actually enforced by, it wasn't, I think, until the early 2000s where every state had a seatbelt law. So if you think about like that,
I grew up with them being seen as optional.
Exactly.
Really weird.
And now looking back at that, you're like, wow, like how could we, how
it's not even
like
a
that?
question.
And so in 10, 20, it might take 30 years again with wildfire. Hopefully not. We have more technology now to influence things, but wouldn't it be great if one day we're sitting there and saying like, of course, why would we put these rose bushes next to our home that can go on fire, right? Like, or of course I need to clear my 0 to 5, and then builders also thinking about, if I'm building in California, I need to build a resilient home, and that's just the way of life. So it's going to take a lot to get there, but that's kind of the way I think about it.
Well, and to go back to that point of commitment,
Yeah.
If you're viewing the market as like, well, we'll dip in and we'll dip out, then you're never going to put the effort into those things because they are, it's generational level
That's right.
payback.
Yeah.
Thinking forward,
Mhm.
are we in a different place? Like, have enough things shifted that viability is on the table and there's a path, or are we not sure at that point? And I know like CSA's position may be different in that than the market as a whole. So I'm sort of thinking like homeowners in particular in California, is it still in crisis? Is there a path out of it? Where do we stand?
Yeah, there's still an availability crisis. The FAIR plan, they're still growing significantly. In fact, they're growing in medium and low wildfire exposure areas, and more so than high now. It's not a good sign.
That's not what it was made for.
That's not what it's made for, So we are still deep in the crisis, from my perspective. But we're starting to see some signs of life, right? The Department of Insurance just had a new regulation, the Sustainable Insurance Strategy. And the first filings on that happened over the summer. Mercury was first, and then CSA was the second filer. It's all public. And that enables us to use catastrophe models, the cost of reinsurance in our rates. And that's what the industry has been telling the department since the 80s, since Prop 103, that they need those things to be able to write property insurance. So now we're starting to get those things, right? But it takes time to get those filings approved. Then you got to earn in the rates, and then you got to change your underwriting guidelines. So I feel like we're not going backwards like we have been. Like the momentum maybe is stopped, and we're starting to see some signs of life of starting to dig our way out of the hole that we're in.
I'm curious for the team and the kind of sentiment internally, is it a point of optimism now for them? Or they like, where is the kind of the tone amongst the team, your team at CSAA about where we stand, and are they still sort of so in the trenches it's hard to feel anything but like it's a lot to get through, or are they seeing green shoots and opportunity?
Yeah, so definitely seeing green shoots of opportunity, right? For us, staying open, while other carriers left.
Yes, you have, yeah.
We also, our auto products grew significantly, right? So there's a lot of positive things that we definitely look at. And I think like us as in general, our culture is very more optimistic and leaning into solutions.
Yeah.
But there's also, the realistic part of things where it's like, we can't just take all property.com, right? Properties.com. We also do have to be financially responsible. And so we're definitely still in the trenches. Every week my team pulls up a map and looks at business we wrote last week to make sure that we feel comfortable with it. So, still kind of deep in the work, still heads down, but definitely some optimism coming through.
Well, I'll leave it on the optimism note. Thank you so much for taking some time out, and honestly for staying committed to finding that path of viability, because it can be necessary for some folks to pull back to push on the rate. I totally get that, and ultimately not a long-term strategy.
Right.
So to see, I always love looking at examples where it's like, well, you said this is impossible, but look what they've done.
Yeah.
And it's one of the companies, obviously so timely, sitting down with Ryan, little did we know, unfortunately. But to hear, 8-9 months later, kind of where things are at and how it's looking, and leaving that on that note of hope, really appreciate that. So thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me.